A desperate mother bursts into the emergency room, holding her listless baby. As the nurse investigates, she uncovers a shocking truth that changes everything. The emergency room buzzed with its usual rhythm, a controlled chaos that unfolded every night at City View General. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered slightly, casting a cold, clinical glow over the rows of chairs in the waiting area, and the steady stream of patients coming through the automatic doors. The night shift had its own atmosphere, a mixture of exhaustion and quiet determination. Nurses and doctors moved like well-practiced dancers, balancing the weight of urgency with the necessity for calm. Rachel Matthews had worked here for nearly 10 years, and if there was one thing she had learned, it was how to find stillness in the storm. She stood at the nurses' station, reviewing patient charts with practiced efficiency, her eyes flicking between screens and papers as her hands moved with swift precision. It was just after midnight. Maria's eyes were unfocused, her breathing ragged from the panic that still clung to her like a second skin. "He was fine this morning," she stammered, clutching the edges of her damp coat as tears streamed down her face. "And then I don't know what happened. He just started breathing funny, and I didn't know what to do. Please help him." Rachel nodded, offering reassurance with a calm tone, though something tugged at the back of her mind, a vague unease that refused to settle. There was something about Maria's demeanor that felt off, but Rachel couldn't quite put her finger on it. "How old is your baby, Maria?" Rachel asked softly, handing her a tissue. "He's just over a month old," Maria whispered, wiping her tear-streaked face. "Please, you have to help him." Rachel's pen hovered over the clipboard as she jotted down the information. The unsettling feeling lingered. Why had Maria waited so long to bring him in? And where was Michael's father? These questions gnawed at her. "How is he?" Maria's voice was barely audible, a whisper lost in the hum of the hospital. "He's stable for now," Rachel said carefully, watching her closely. "We're still running tests, but the doctors are doing everything they can." Maria nodded, though her eyes never left the window. Her hands remained clenched into fists at her sides. "Thank you," she whispered again, though her voice lacked the relief or gratitude Rachel had expected. Rachel's unease grew. There was something in Maria's eyes, a flicker of guilt, or perhaps shame. It was subtle, but Rachel had seen enough patients and desperate situations to recognize when someone was hiding something. As the rain continued to fall outside, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much darker story. Something wasn't right, and the truth, whatever it was, would soon unravel. The minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Rachel couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had been gnawing at her side. Ask, explain. Maria's eyes were unfocused, her breathing ragged from panic. "He was fine this morning," she stammered, clutching the edges of her damp coat. "And then, I don't know what happened. He just started breathing funny, and I didn't know what to do. Please help him." Rachel nodded, offering reassurance despite the nagging tug at the back of her mind. Something about the situation felt off, a vague unease that lingered like a shadow. She couldn't quite place it, but it gnawed at her instincts. "How old is your baby, Maria?" Rachel asked softly, her pen hovering over the clipboard as she jotted down notes. "He's just over a month old," Maria whispered, wiping tears from her face. "Please, you have to help him." Rachel wrote down the information, but couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why had Maria waited so long to bring the baby in? And where was Michael's father? These questions buzzed in her mind, but there was no time to dwell. She wanted to believe that Maria was simply overwhelmed and scared, but her instincts told her otherwise. As Rachel stepped back into the waiting area, she found Maria standing near the window, staring blankly at the rain-soaked streets outside. The woman's face was pale, her posture tense, as if bracing for something far worse than bad news. "How is he?" Maria's voice was barely audible, swallowed by the hum of the hospital. "He's stable for now," Rachel replied carefully, watching her closely. "We're still running tests, but the doctors are doing everything they can." Maria nodded, though her eyes never left the window. Her hands remained clenched into fists at her sides. "Thank you," she whispered again, though her voice lacked the relief or gratitude Rachel had expected. Rachel's unease deepened. There was something in Maria's eyes, a flicker of guilt, or perhaps shame. It was subtle, but Rachel had seen it. Whatever secrets Maria carried, they were buried deep, and uncovering them might mean the difference between life and death for little Michael. Ask, explain. Passed since baby Michael had been admitted, and she needed to check on his progress. But before she could move, the sight of a figure in the waiting room stopped her in her tracks. Maria was still there, sitting stiffly by the window, her posture rigid, hands clutching her coat, as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The rain outside streaked down the glass in long, slow lines, mirroring the tension that pulsed through the air. "Stay here," Rachel murmured to Linda, pushing her chair back. "I'm going to talk to her." She approached Maria cautiously, mindful not to startle her. The woman's gaze was distant, fixed on something beyond the stormy night outside. Her pale face reflected in the window's glass, ghostly, almost detached. "Maria," Rachel called softly. The woman's head jerked slightly, as though she hadn't heard her approach. She blinked, tearing her eyes from the rain and focusing on Rachel, though there was a glimmer of something unreadable in her expression. Fear, perhaps, but not the kind Rachel. Terrifying. Clarity, Maria wasn't Michael's mother. She had known something was wrong. But this kidnapping... Her mind raced, piecing together Maria's erratic behavior. The vague answers, the fear, it all made sense now. "I thought there was something off," Rachel muttered, her stomach nodding. Do we notify the police?" "They've already been contacted. There's more. A report came in a couple of hours ago, from a hospital 2 towns over. A baby matching Michael's description was abducted this morning. The police believe it's the same child." Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She back toward Maria, who was still pacing near the window, unaware that her secret was about to come crashing down around her. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "We can't let her leave. She's dangerous, desperate." Dr. Jameson nodded. "Security is already on alert, but we need to keep her calm until the police get here." Rachel clenched the sheet of blood results in her hand, her pulse racing. She had to be smart about this. The outcome, Maria's life as she knew it, was over. And Amanda, what would Amanda find when she arrived? A child who had been taken from her. A stranger's touch on the most sacred bond of all, motherhood. Rachel couldn't shake the image of 2 women, each broken in their own way, colliding under the harshest circumstances imaginable. She reached out tentatively, brushing a finger against Michael's tiny hand. His grip reflexively tightened around her fingertip. And for a fleeting moment, Rachel felt something akin to hope. He was alive. He was safe. That had to count for something. But outside this room, the world was far less forgiving. The clock ticked relentlessly toward Amanda's arrival, every second stretching into an eternity. Rachel left the trauma room, pulling the door shut softly behind her. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and exhaling slowly. Her mind swirled with questions she didn't have answers to. Would Amanda forgive herself for leaving her baby unattended? The outcome: Maria's life as she knew it was over. Amanda? What would Amanda find when she arrived? A child who had been taken from her. A stranger's touch on the most sacred bond of all, motherhood. Rachel couldn't shake the image of two women, each broken in their own way, colliding under the harshest circumstances imaginable. She reached out tentatively, brushing a finger against Michael's tiny hand. His grip reflexively tightened around her fingertip. And for a fleeting moment, Rachel felt something akin to hope. He was alive. He was safe. That had to count for something. But outside this room, the world was far less forgiving. The clock ticked relentlessly toward Amanda's arrival, every second stretching into an eternity. Rachel left the trauma room, pulling the door shut softly behind her. She leaned against the wall, closing her eyes and exhaling slowly. Her mind swirled with questions she didn't have answers to. Would Amanda forgive herself for leaving her baby unattended? Would Amanda forgive herself for leaving her baby unattended? And Amanda, what would Amanda find when she arrived? A child who had been taken from her. A stranger's touch on the most sacred bond of all. Came next. Maria's life was over as she knew it. Time moved slowly after that. Rachel stood by Michael's bedside, lost in thought, until the sound of rushed footsteps in the hallway snapped her out of her reverie. She stepped back as the door opened. Amanda Pierce entered the room, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with desperation and fear. She moved with the jerky, frantic energy of someone who had been on edge for hours, unable to breathe, unable to think of anything other than her missing child. Rachel's heart clenched as she watched the woman approach the crib, her hand trembling as she reached for Michael. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, her lips quivering as she looked down at her baby. Michael, she whispered, her voice breaking as her fingers gently touched his tiny cheek. Oh my God, Michael. Rachel stepped back, giving Amanda space, watching as the woman cradled her baby with the kind of fierce, detective love that only a mother could feel. The scene was raw, emotional, and Rachel felt her own eyes. The remnants of the storm still clung to the world around her, droplets of rain glistening on leaves and flowers, like tiny diamonds catching the light. Rachel sat on a weathered bench, breathing in the crisp morning air, trying to shake the heaviness that had taken root in her chest. But no matter how deeply she inhaled, or how hard she tried to focus on the calm after the tempest, the images wouldn't leave her mind. Maria's tear-streaked face, Amanda's overwhelming relief as she cradled her baby once more, the night's events replayed in her thoughts, an unrelenting loop. She was lost in these reflections when the faint sound of footsteps approached. Looking up, she saw Amanda standing a few feet away, Michael nestled securely in her arms. The sight tugged at Rachel's heart, a bittersweet mix of joy and sorrow rising within her. "Can I sit?" Amanda asked softly, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Rachel nodded, gesturing to the space beside her. Of course. Amanda lowered herself onto the... He might have died. Rachel swallowed hard, her emotions swirling in a confusing mix of sadness, anger, and reluctant compassion. "You're right," she said softly. But she made the wrong choice. She should have called for help the moment she found him. Amanda nodded slowly, fresh tears brimming in her eyes. "I know, but still, part of me feels like she saved him too. In her own twisted way, she kept him safe." They sat in silence after that, the sounds of the hospital fading into the background as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Amanda cradled her son, and Rachel sat beside her, feeling the weight of the night begin to lift, if only by a fraction. Eventually, Amanda stood, adjusting Michael in her arms. "I thank you again," she said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude, "for everything." Rachel managed a small smile, though it was tinged with sadness. "You take care of him, Amanda. He's a lucky little boy." Amanda nodded, her lips trembling under the weight of her emotions. Wit.